Why do nations still follow a restrictive trade policy? The nations do follow trade restrictive measures even in this period of globalization. So why do they do that? Let's look into the arguments for restrictive trade policy. Arguments for restrictive trade policy are in fact the merits of trade restrictive measures. So let's look into the arguments for a restrictive trade policy one by one. First one is infant industries argument. So in order to protect the initial stage industries or companies from foreign competition, free trade policy is not able to protect the initial stage industry. The protecting initial stage industries is possible only under a restrictive trade policy. We have to impose some restrictions on foreign competition, on foreign companies penetrating into the domestic market. So in order to protect the domestic industries from foreign competition which are at the initial stage, restrictive trade policies are must. Second one is diversification of industries argument. In order to diversify the industry, in order to diversify the economy, we have to have trade restriction in place. So what is the diversification of the economy? The expansion of production into various sectors, the prevalence of numerous industries, numerous sectors in the economy. So rather than depending on the foreign competition for various products, just have import substitution. This is the way in which diversification is done in the economy. This is possible only under trade protection, not under free trade policy. So in order to protect the existing employment, trade protection is must. How does that happen? Whenever the free trade policy is in practice, some existing domestic companies may lose the market share, or they may be compelled to shut down their industry. The existing employment may lose as foreign competition is heightening because of foreign trade. So foreign trade leads to the destruction of the existing employment. So in order to protect the existing employment who have been employed in the domestic sectors have to be protected. The existing domestic sectors have to be protected from foreign competition. So this is possible when restrictive trade policies are in practice. Similarly, in order to create new employment opportunities as well, we need trade restrictive measures in picture. So how do the new employment opportunities will be created when trade restrictive measures are in practice? The new industries may come as the economy is expanding its business, as the economy is going for diversification. Then new industries will come, new firms will be started. That means a new employment opportunities will be created with the import substitution sector. In order to have a favorable balance of trade, the nation requires restrictive trade policy rather than free trade policy. Free trade policy is argued to be in favor of some nations, probably the developed nations, rather than helping the developing nations. So for the developing nations, what required is to have a protective trade policy in practice to have a favorable balance of trade or favorable trade position or desirable trade position by blocking the import of certain goods and services that are not necessary, that are not vital in the domestic economy. It is possible by imposing tariff and non-tariff barriers on the import of certain goods and services. This can be done although not desirable. Next one is, in order to block the dumping, the nation requires the restrictive trade policies in practice. Dumping is a kind of international price discrimination done by the companies of the foreign nations by dumping their commodities, making it available in the domestic market at cheaper prices than the domestic prices, thereby causing for the domestic firms to lose the market share. They may have to shut down their operation. Then the market will be captured by the foreign companies through dumping or international price discrimination. So this is need to be checked. This is need to be blocked. Only possible under restrictive trade measures and not under free trade policy. Free trade policy enables the foreign companies for dumping, just like Chinese companies dumping their commodities in many of the nations including India. So dumping can be controlled under restrictive trade policy in practice. So in order to improve the terms of trade of the nation or trade index of the nation can put some barriers on the import of the commodity, just like the imposing tariff on the import of the commodity. So how does that become materialized? When the import tax is imposed on the commodities being imported from the foreign country, suppose the foreign country's offer curve is inelastic, it will be inelastic when we are the main buyers of that commodity. Even if we impose tariff on that commodity, the commodity will be traded. So that leads to improvement of terms of trade of the home nation. So this is possible only under protective trade. So retaliatory trade is possible only under protective trade policy measures. It is absent in the free trade policy. For example, when India came into an agreement with the European Union, just as the discussion has been going on for India and the European Union came into an agreement in the recently. So when that was happened, India will not be able to retaliate the European Union's action to impose tariff on India's commodities being imported. So retaliatory trade is possible only under restrictive trade measures. This is the case, even though retaliation is not a desirable case in the international trade scenario. But this may be necessary in certain cases. For example, when the United States impose some barriers, import some tariff on Chinese commodities from being imported, China in retaliation impose tariff barriers, tariff on US commodities being imported to China. So retaliation is possible when trade restrictive measures are in practice, just like US-China trade war. The last point I have listed out is unfair foreign competition under free trade policy in practice. So when free trade policy in practice, some unfair competition may happen, just like the foreign governments may subsidize their export industries. They may give subsidies to the export sector of the foreign governments. Then the foreign companies will be able to export the commodities into the home country domestic economy at cheaper prices. So how does that happen? It was happened because of subsidy. Subsidy is actually not part of the fair competition. It is the unfair part of the competition, and that is possible even under foreign competition and not only under trade restrictive measures. So because of all these matters, because of all these benefits, free trade policy is not desirable or the restrictive trade policy is desirable because of the prevalence of all these 9 merits of the restrictive trade policy measures. Thank you.